All right, thank you so much, Zeba. It's great to be here. Zeba is really the architect of Doris Duke's involvement in all this incredible work. So a round of applause for Zeba. And thank you so much to Sue and to MPAC for hosting this space, for curating this space. It's incredible to be here again this year and wonderful to be surrounded by so many powerful creatives and their supporters. So thanks to Sue and MPAC. Thank you all for being here. It's just absolutely tremendous. It's great to be with all of you. We're going to try to have a conversation about topics that we hope are of interest to all of you. We'll have a chance to throw it out to you. We've actually got a good amount of time here, so be thinking about what questions you might have for our distinguished panelists. Just remember that a question's like a phrase that terminates in a question mark. It's not a pitch. There's plenty of time for that at Sundance. So I think where I'd love to start is, I suspect for so many people in this room, there's not a clear line of demarcation between their personal creative passions, a social project or ideal that they're pursuing, and then the work that they're putting together. And so I just think it would be helpful for them to hear from you all, like whether you use the word impact or not, what is your relationship to some of the larger ideas that your work has been concerned with? And maybe, James, we can start with you and just kind of go down the line.
Thank you, Sam. Grateful to be here. What a great space. This is amazing. I definitely resonate with just the question of identity driving and influencing the work that I'm a part of and that I want to get behind. I think that this last kind of guest speaker that you guys had made me think of connection. I think for me, it's what work connects to me and feels special, and that I believe that connects to an audience that I'm also passionate about. And so The Apprentice, for example, Ali Abbasi is an Iranian filmmaker that I've been a fan of for a long time. He says bold things and isn't afraid of pushing boundaries in the right way. And that project, I think, needed a team that was bold enough and trusted him enough to get behind it and to foster the connection of reaching an audience. And so we've had a little bit of success. There's a long road ahead as well, but that's a bit of how I think about it.
Great. Amanda?
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here. This is such an incredible group of people, and I think I've seen the proliferation of the word impact throughout Sundance this year. It feels like it's everywhere, right? And so in some ways it feels like it means everything, and it also means nothing. But what I think we're really saying is that each one of us is here and doing this work. If you're a storyteller, you're doing it because you want to co-create a better world. We're here because we do want to make the world better, right? So essentially that really is impact. But I think when it comes to impact campaigning and impact strategy, there's something really interesting and deliberate there. So if you're a content creator, obviously you may want your content to spark and elevate conversations, right? You may want your content to reach and engage new audiences. All of that is impact, and all of that is impact strategy. And I think that it's really about making sure that impact isn't just a wish and an aspiration, but turning it into a plan. And so that, for me, is what's important about impact.
Yes, first of all, thank you for having me here. I'm always so honored to be invited into spaces like this. I am not Muslim, but I hear I'm Muslim adjacent, which I appreciate. Means I'm doing right. Maybe I'll revert someday, but right now we'll see. So I'm a child of the 70s, which means I was born right after the Civil Rights Movement, which means there was this idea that black people had won, even though it sort of ended with the assassination of our leader. So my mom, who's still alive, 87 years old, with us very on it and texting me all the time, was just that generation of people who were like, now it's time to see if we can get the benefits of that civil rights movement, and then very quickly found out, they aren't all showing up. So, and I was an only child. It's interesting going through that exercise, which I think is one of the greatest things I've ever seen, the exercise that was done, the presentation. I just want to be clear about that. I've learned recently that the way I identify myself, if there was no white supremacy in America's history of racism, I told you this morning, I would identify myself as an only child. but because of racism, I'm a black man, but inside, I'm an only child. So I was taken around by my mom everywhere and very quickly learned there's the work of the job you were hired to do, and there's the work you have to do as a member of your community with some level of privilege to make sure it's easier for the person behind you. So I'm like, is that called impact? Sure. But it was never a thing that I didn't know, especially as I started to make it sort of in show business in whatever ways that is. I had dreams of becoming famous. That like I was very clear that like now that I'm here, even on the things I'm doing, I have to be aware that like I have to look around on the first season of my show, United Shades, and go, I'm the only black person employed on this show, a show about intersectionality and diversity. I have to say I will not come back for season 2 unless you allow me to hire more black and brown people on this show. So I also had to check with my wife first before I said that. So, and she said yes. So I'm clear. She's also the hero who said, yeah, you can do that. We'll figure it out. So for me, impact, it's like whatever the language changes, whatever DEI, critical race studies, woke, impact, we're going to be doing the work either way, and my community's going to be doing the work. Is Favi here, Fabiana Rodriguez? There, she's back there. I mean, first of all, I know this is Muslim House. It also feels sort of like Oakland House a little bit. But Fabiana is somebody I work with in the Bay Area in Oakland, and like without a doubt, we are talking about the art and the impact. And Fabi says culture leads political change, and so without a doubt, I am in the mix with people who know that it's not one or the other. It's all happening at the same time in equal measure, all at once. Everything all at once.
So let's pick up right there, and Amanda, I want to go to you next. So, you know, I sort of turning the question around then and kind of asking about the relationship between kind of culture and impact. I think it can be easy, certainly like in my side of the business, it's easy to sometimes think like the way that culture can drive social change is when the cultural artifact is about the change. You know, it's a movie about X idea. And I think something that Participant really demonstrated is, and you made this distinction between the campaign and the work, that there's all kinds of different creative production and works that can inspire discussions about social issues. And sometimes the work is centrally about that, but sometimes it's ancillary or it's evocative. Could you talk a little bit about that? Like what are the different ways that you've seen culture being a powerful vessel for social change?
Yeah. So I spent the first half of my career in really more the traditional social sector. I was working on like on the ground programs for anti-malarial medication delivery and like support for smallholder farmers and that kind of thing. And I think what I realized is that all of that stuff is great. You know, getting more resources out there, getting partnerships formed, and getting that work done is amazing. But you can have the most effective vaccine in the world, right? And if people don't believe that it's safe, it's not going to go anywhere. So the work that belief and knowledge and ultimately culture does to actually accelerate and advance progress is so huge. So when I transitioned over into more of the media side of things and the campaign side of things, that became really the reason that I do my work, right? Like you can't have political change and systems change without it. It's really at the basis of everything we do, and it's really personal to me too. I mean, I don't know how many of you in this room do what you do because of something that shaped you early on. For me, it was definitely like questioning my identity, growing up in a mixed household, but also like a couple of films that just rocked my world when I was like 13 years old, right? Like there were a couple of like public access films that completely changed me, you know, and some of them were just like very niche. I watched one called The Color of Fear. Has anyone seen this like super low budget movie with like 6 men sitting in a circle and they all come from different ethnic backgrounds and they basically just get in this deep conversation, argument, and all the feelings come out. That just completely changed my life. That Joy Luck Club, another film that was like a documentary about migrant farm workers, right? So like part of it is I think that it's this question of opening your heart early on, right? And that is really, really what stories and culture do for us. So for me, it feels extremely personal. But I can talk a little bit more about the how at some point, but that for me is the why.
And then we absolutely have to come back to the how. I think then, sort of, come on, James, in both of your stories about culture and impact in your work, you both made note of who is making the work. within your answers. And so can you, again, we often think of the core thing as sort of what is the work about, but could you each talk about the importance of sort of who is making the thing or who is making it as a form of impact? Maybe James, then Kamau?
Yeah. I mean, I think, in the world we live in today, it's as noisy and as, complicated and distracted as you could ever get. And I think that voice, that singular voice that one would stay true to because their work and their art is so interwoven with their identity or the desire to express something that is so deeply personal to them is what, needs to kind of remain true and consistent through. And so I would say the impact campaign work and, the culture piece and what the actual expression of that is needs to just feel as real and honest as possible. And being at Issa Rae's company and kind of, getting to know her a little bit and the people around her, I think she's just she's such a great example of that, of having remained so true, and authentic is a word that gets thrown around a lot, but true to who she is and what she believes in and the community that she's uplifting and supporting and, launching a show and, fighting, with executives about the writers that need to be in that show, and even though they don't have the credits, and how a person like that as a creator is involved from, helping write the script to marketing the stuff and creating a platform on social media that, invest in a team. And I think that kind of, I think as audiences, as consumers now, we have such a high bar and such a high standard for what feels real and how it reaches us and how we connect to it, that it just needs to feel like it's coming from a source that we believe in and that we relate to. And I think as a creator to be okay starting a bit small and not, thinking about a movie that you're making and premiering, needs to be in 2,000 screens in a theater, as it's coming out, or it needs to be on Netflix. Like being okay with investing and being patient with investing in a local community that become, get your first 100 fans and find what that culture is, because sometimes that also might not be clear to you as someone who's making something. You might not know. You just might have a feeling of something you want to make, and so sometimes I think now it takes longer too, and you have to be a bit more patient.
And Kamau, you what beyond that it was just wrong that the show didn't have a diverse crew, and was a really unfunny irony, given the show. What started to change in making the show?
Oh, I can tell you exactly. First of all, I want to shout out my publicist, but more my friend Heather Brown over here, who's looking away because she doesn't want attention. Because Heather was so critical when I got to CNN, when I was like, oh, it's a black woman publicist. But there was a way in which early on in our relationship, I didn't know whose side she was on, basically. Are you on the CNN side or are you on my side? And at one point, I had an interview with a black outlet that really was coming at me for not being black in the right way. And I turned to Heather at the interview and go, you have to understand, I'm not cool black, I'm weirdo black. And Heather went, I got you. And from that point forward, I felt comfortable with Heather telling me to do whatever she wanted me to do, because I knew she knew what was at stake for me if I went and walked into the Breakfast Club, where my blackness comes off weird, versus when I go into a podcast, So that's just an example of the institutional difference of a publicist who is like you and a publicist who isn't like you. But then I would say, so the first episode of the show, which is sort of the one that's most known, we did an episode where it was me meeting the KKK. So I'm the only black person on the crew. No black people in the KKK.
What?
But yeah, I know.
It's been a huge shock.
It was before DEI. Yeah. So what that means is that at one point we were filming and I'm engaging with the KKK and asking questions and having to really hold in a lot of emotions and I realized that we're not filming. And I'm just wasting time talking to the KKK now, and this costs me something. And so I talked to the producer, you have to let me know we're not filming, because I need to not be like this all day if we're going to be here all day till we burn the cross at night. And they didn't get that. So cut to the last season of the show. We do an episode about Is America Gotten Too Woke? This is 3 years ago. It's funny. And so we're doing this episode.
Watch that episode.
Yeah. By that time, the showrunner, one of the executive producers of the show is a man named Morgan Fallon, who's a white guy, but gets it. He was on Anthony Bourdain's show since the beginning. He's my white brother from another mother and father. And Mo said, it is important to me that this show has an all-black film crew, which sounds like not a big deal, but that means 3 different people who are working the cameras who are all black. And he said, this show needs to do that. So that means he had to hire people who were sort of operating slightly outside of what their resume said because they'd never gotten that opportunity before, which means Mo then had to know that he had to mentor them because they weren't ready, they hadn't had the reps, and he had to be patient with them so that we could get the thing we needed, which was his all-black film crew. So Mo, the white guy, had to be like, it's going to cost me some work because these people haven't had this opportunity before. So then cut to the woke episode. I'm interviewing people about the schools going too woke, and there's this guy who says the schools are wasting too much money feeding kids breakfast and lunch. And one woman saying the schools need to focus more on the history of the history. And I was like, you mean like the genocide of Native Americans and transatlantic slave trade? She's like, no, not that stuff. And then at the end of the interview with these people, I'm like, one of the photographer, Andre Leroux, who's a good friend of mine, who's also a black guy, said all the black crew members were looking at me like, he's doing it. And they all could feel how hard I was working, so that afterwards, when I finished, they all went, whoo, and I went, yeah, and that's all we needed to say. Whoo, see you later. You know what I mean? Like, I don't have to explain what I'm going through. They can, even the way they're filming it, and on top of that, when you have a black film crew, they know how to light black faces so we don't all look like we're the same complexion. So it's all of it. It's the content, it's the culture, and it's the technical expertise.
I want to ask sort of one more personal question before we get into some of the brass tacks about kind of how to build impact campaigns. But one that I suspect will be meaningful to a lot of people here who want to follow in the footsteps, in the trails that you all have blazed, which is sort of what it's like, and Kamau, you brought us there, like what it's like to be the person who's advancing this work in an industry that isn't really well designed to facilitate it. And I had a chance to talk to a few people about their projects, and like, there's just a million amazing, I'm doing a Muslim Get Out, and I'm doing, just like these amazing projects that we can't wait to see. And I can just tell that people are having meetings where someone is just hearing, you're representing an identity, let's try to get that out. You're delivering a message, let's try to get that out of the piece. So if you could each sort of just talk about what it's been like to have to fight for the space for these ideas and these projects. And again, maybe we'll just kind of go down the line. James, if you want to start us off.
Where do I begin? I mean, that's a tall order question. I think.
Tell us how you do it. How do you do your magic?
I guess most recently, I think started out really maybe overstretching myself. I think I would, coming up as a manager that's trying to build a little bit of a business and trying to build a film slate and get one project off the ground. I think I spent a lot of time reading and mentoring and trying to find that thing that's of our culture and break it in, and I still do that a lot. But I think most recently have had to be a bit tougher and know that that toughness of love. Like, for example, I met a writer just recently who swears that they have I keep referencing Issa Rae, but the Iranian Muslim American version of an Insecure. And so read it, good script, needed a little bit of work, and I said, well, what's your version of the awkward black girl? And they were just like, what do you mean? And I'm like, the fact that you don't even know what that question means is unacceptable. It's just like unacceptable.
And we're done here.
Like you just like you don't even just respect your craft. Let's put the cultural stuff aside. You don't respect your craft enough, And so I think I've tried to find this balance, I mentor in more formal ways, whatever, still, But that's why, again, I think the Ali Abbasi example, when people, the amount of people that said I should not do that, back this movie and back this filmmaker, and said I was crazy, and all those different things, I felt confident in him and the relationship that we had, and the respect and the work that he's put in for his craft. And now I'm working with him to mentor and find other young Iranian filmmakers from different parts of the world with a person who can do that. So,
Amanda?
That's amazing. I feel like you got to learn to be multilingual. That's my feeling, is that there's certain words that I can't say when I go into a room. If I go into a room with a studio, for example, I don't. Sometimes talking about impact is very womp womp, you know? So I have to frame it in a different way, and that's allowed me to become fluent in a lot of different languages over time. And then you also, you identify, you find the people that are going to understand it and are tied to the project in a really prominent way. And sometimes that's the director, sometimes it's an actor, sometimes it's a writer, and then you get together with them and you work out a plan together. That's how I think I've been able to progress a lot of campaigns.
Come on.
So all of my projects are intending to assist the dismantling of white supremacy, but that's not how I always pitch it. That's not always how I pitch. And so I'm just saying what you just said is so, I smile because I'm surrounded by, some of the people I work with I'm closest with are academics. My Kelly Rafferty, who's my right hand, is a PhD from Arizona State, or no, from Berkeley, I'm sorry. She would be mad. She worked at Arizona State. And then my wife's a PhD from UC Riverside. And so I'm surrounded by these academics. And sometimes the feedback I've gotten is like, Kelly needs to say white supremacy less in the meetings. And Kelly's this white queer woman who's like, I'm not afraid to say it. And so we have to sort of do the thing where we have to code switch to get the thing across and highlight the things we want people to know about while also keeping the thing in there. So like, for example, with, we did the biggest project we sort of did, I feel like that shows this, is we did a 4-part docuseries called We Need to Talk About Cosby, which was about the crimes and career of Bill Cosby that was absolutely trying to be an attack on rape culture as a whole, in addition to talking about, because that was Bill Cosby's crimes was a window into that. And so, but you can't tell Showtime that. I mean, Vinny Malhotra's great, and he was at Showtime at the time, but you can't like put that on the poster. But absolutely, it's like in there. But then my job is to like really hold on to the fact that like we can do this. It's got to have propulsion, movement, humor. It's got to be like sticky. It's got to be like soundbitey. And that's where I come in to like make sure that it's something that people will take with them and not feel like they're being lectured at. And so it is a delicate balance. And I just want to say this too about, first of all, Issa Rae is the greatest example of this ever. Awkward black girl. Like I love the story you told because Issa Rae can't get insecure unless she goes, I'm going to make Awkward Black Girl by myself with my friends. HBO goes, we like that. Would you like to do that over here? And can we change the name so we can own it? Whatever it is. And so the idea being that like we have to sort of make our own things because you all have no idea how many amazing projects just weren't allowed to exist because somebody was like, I don't get it. I mean, amazing, world-changing, culture-shaking projects that just will never exist because they can't figure out how to get the people in the industry to do it, and they haven't figured out how to do it on their own. So we're really losing culture right now.
So let's start getting into how to do this and the different ways that you guys have done this. Amanda, I want to start with you. You introduced in your earlier in the panel the distinction between kind of the work and the marketing. And I felt that at times there is a feel, and even actually I say when foundations invest in impact campaigns, there's somehow this implicit idea that commercially marketing a movie is the dessert, and the impact marketing is the vegetables. And in fact, if the impact marketing campaign looks too entertaining or could also serve the pecuniary interest of the film, then maybe is that really an impact marketing campaign? And Participant really challenged this distinction in powerful ways. So could you talk a little bit about like actually what is impact marketing and how should we really think about it within the context of producing culture?
Absolutely. Marketing and impact are part of a virtuous cycle, right? So you obviously can't have impact unless people actually see your content. So it's important to make sure that the marketing is incredibly sound. And then it just so happens that the impact can actually start to fuel a bit more of the people seeing it over time, right? So that was something I think we uniquely, I mean, a lot of people here understand that, but for me, it was really exciting when I got to participant to know that they cared about the commercial viability of their projects, right? They weren't really just making niche projects that weren't going to be seen, that they really wanted them to have the right distributors and the right marketing, the right P&A, and then the right impact campaigns behind them as well. So something that actually one of my colleagues, Nicole Starr, who's right there, and I did a lot, is, we made sure that we were, when we were structuring impact campaigns, we were looking at how they would engage and expand audiences in a new and different way, right? So one example that I'll give you is on the film Dark Waters, which was a Mark Ruffalo film that I worked on. I led the campaign from start to finish on that. And it's about 5 years old now, so we can see how the impact actually came true. But one thing that we did is we had the luxury of starting really early. That's always a huge asset, right? So not only in starting at getting different perspectives on the script, which is something that Impact does so well, and did with us at Participant a lot, but also just starting to really map the landscape of people. Who are your people? Who are the organizations and the activists and the leaders and the journalists, et cetera, that are really tied into whatever the story is and for whom the story that you're making is a gift. And for Dark Waters, we identified all of those folks. They happen to be amazing community leaders. We joined them together in a coalition that became like a big tent, basically. And over time, they wrote op-eds, and they produced newsletters, and they sent people to go out and see the film, and they became our army of support. It was like an army of champions. We were able to start to engage them really on, like 6 months before the film came out, bring them in and make them feel ownership. And I think over time what happens is that you get a team of validators for your content that actually does both things, right? It really, it improves and accelerates the impact of those community members and organizations, but it also helps to drive positive word of mouth about the film. So that's one example.
Wow, I think that this point about it's got to be, to get that virtuous cycle, the marketing has to be so resonant with the sort of aesthetic qualities of the story. You've done really different kinds of stories, right? You've done a Netflix special. You've done, documentary. Like, what is the process? What are the conversations like to make sure that the marketing is both true to the story, but then also, serving the larger project of dismantling white supremacy and connecting to audiences in that way?
I mean, I think some of that is also about not being so precious about the product once you make it and letting the people who is their job to the marketing people are not the content people, and really good marketing people are incredible. And so if you can find good marketing people to work with, and they also take feedback. I remember to think about the Cosby thing. We had the marketing people had 10 different versions of the poster, and some of them made me go, ah! It was just this is making me sick. And then we found the one that but the fact is something has to be a distilled image that is on social media, not just a poster, but a thing that somebody will stop scrolling past, and that thing is not for me to create. So I think some of that is to really understand that this part is not me.
And you really are an auteur, and other people here are.
I didn't know that until now. Good.
In my opinion, anyway. Noted critic, Sam Gill. But did you ever, as sort of someone who really brings a clear idea about the social project to the work, did you ever learn something from the marketer? To Amanda's point, did you ever have a marketer who helped you to see a layer in the idea?
Oh yeah, for sure. That's what I mean. That's why I love. There's two parts of the thing I love that, other than the creation, the editing is important. Needs more respect, because the editor, if you find a good editor, will really make you see things you didn't see and help you sharpen the thing that you wanted. And then the marketing is somebody who's how do we distill this into the smallest package possible and make it irresistible? So certainly, there are ways in which. I've seen marketers come up with things I'm I would have never thought about that, and that makes sense, and thank God you have that job and I don't have that job. Thank God it's not even the title of We Need to Talk About Cosby wasn't mine. I had a lot of bad titles I came up with.
Oh, wow.
And so you have to really release some aspect of your creative vision. And so I understand, for me, it's always best idea wins. And on some level, like the TV show Seinfeld was a horrible actor, but he knew that if he surrounded himself with great actors, the show was called Seinfeld, he would get credit for it, and all the billions. But like, I sort of feel that way. Like, I'm going to be precious about the content, and I'm going to be precious about the package, but at some point you have to release it. And hopefully, it takes years to find the crew of people who get you, who you know are going to have better ideas than you, and you can release to them.
I think the write-up on this panel will now be Kamau Bell, Seinfeld, a horrible actor.
Yes. I'll take that. I got some other things to say, too, about Seinfeld. But.
James,
he's good with teenagers.
You did something with The Apprentice that is really interesting, which is, and I don't know if it was sort of intentional, but like in some ways, part of the MPAC campaign, as I've experienced, is the controversy around Dan Snyder and trying to keep the film under wraps as part of like I'd love to hear about what are some of the ways that you think about impact campaigns, and are they always express impact campaigns, or are there other ways that you've tried to build buzz and to market your works that you can see that it's having an interesting social impact, even if in the first instance that's not what it was or what it looked like?
Yes, I started my career in music and making music videos as a college student, and was fortunate enough to work with some very talented artists, and Stephanie Germanata was one of them, and I feel like the artists that I was working with as a music video producer always had a social consciousness or a social impact kind of mission-oriented disposition, and it always felt, again, singular. I didn't come up with them being separate, and have a lot of respect for actually participants in a studio that I've looked up to and admired since I was a kid. And so I've always seen it as one. And I even look at, like I was talking to Khalil just 24 hours ago about this movie, and was referencing Kendrick Lamar and how I feel like his last album and this last body of work that we've seen is an impact. Like, to me, that's such an example. Not Like Us, that song, and the way that they orchestrated and created a cultural moment for the world that I think touched and moved young kids to old. Like, to me, that's impact. So I guess starting out, it's defining it, and for me, I define impact as moving hearts and changing hearts and minds, and for the better. And so, yeah, The Apprentice, again, I think, the controversy helped in drawing awareness to it to a degree, but I think that it also just, Trump being so fatigued and all of us being so tired of wanting to hear that, I think that I would have probably done that a little differently. I think I would have led with Roy Cohn and Jeremy Strong a bit more, and used the relationship as an entry point, and just let people experience the content. And then
Can you tell Jeremy Strong I love him? That's all.
I will do that. I will do that.
Sorry to interrupt. Can I add one more thing?
Yeah, please.
Because it's sort of back to this whole marketing idea that we were talking about. So, because I realize as I think about it, there are times where you have to realize the marketing can hurt you, and you have to be able to stand up for yourself. And I remember as United Shades of America went on, the first season they we're going to go film for 2 weeks and do a commercial, and then by the next season you get the posters emailed to you the day before. And and I'm not blaming them. It's just there's those resources go somewhere else because they go to the new thing, the Stanley Tucci, and so I got emailed the poster for the new season, and they had always been great. And it was the new season was the main graphic was a photoshopped image, clearly, of me looking over a fence, looking over a fence into what this is the poster, just and I was like, I look like the bed intruder. I look like I'm a black man in America, and you're making it look like I'm violating somebody's privacy instead of inviting people to talk to me. And I really did have a moment I can't stand, and this is people I'd worked with for years, but I can't, that's not going to help the show. Maybe even if it's going to help the show, it's not going to help me. I always have this thing of I have to be able to walk around Oakland at the end of the day. And if you make me look like the bed intruder, I can't walk around Oakland. So I do think you have to be really careful about this stuff and pay attention to it, even if you're with people who you trust, I trusted those people.
Totally. I mean, marketing always needs another set of eyes on things, I think.
So let's stay with you, Amanda. What's changing now? The industry's changing. The way people consume content is changing. rapidly. What to you are some of the kind of either the most important trends or opportunities to be thinking about in making impact a part of marketing?
I mean, I think it's a really exciting time, even though it's chaotic. And obviously, we're going through a crisis. We're going through a massive historic contraction. Everything is changing. The business models are changing. But that's exactly the kind of ground for opportunity, right? And innovation. So for me, obviously, we need new economic models. We need new economic models that fuel amazing content and also fuel distribution. And I know there's a lot of really smart people working on this right now, right? There's no sort of lack of audience demand for the kind of work that's being made. We just need to figure out the economic model there. But what I think about a lot is the ecosystem of key players. So certainly the audience is there, and that's such an important player. But I think about sort of the creators, the storytellers, the filmmakers, et cetera, on one side. I think about the foundations and the kind of social sector, the nonprofits, the activists, et cetera, here. And how those two play together. And then the distributors here. And what I think we need to figure out is how to make that ecosystem work more cohesively. You talked a little bit about how do we blend these even financing models? How do we think about the for-profit and nonprofit together in new ways? We've always been constrained by some of the legal issues around how nonprofit money works, right? And I think we just need to be more creative there. And we need to break those systems and start to blend our finances together in new ways. And this is the moment for that.
I mean, the challenge I think with just to comment on the foundation side, to me, there's sort of two or three challenges that I think foundations are facing, and I think actually to your point, our opportunity, like the people in this room need to help solve. So like one is, I think like the social change is itself evolving, and so foundations that are used to, I use a grant to drive social change, giving to an organization, civil society, like we're needing to change what we do. So for example, like we've been working with you, Kamau, this weekend, you've like taken over our social media accounts, and like us as a media company, it's like a different way of thinking about philanthropy, and it's like a new set of risks for us. Like I didn't tell my board ahead of time, that we're doing that, but I can't wait to tell them afterward. But so I think there's that's one thing. I think a second thing is that I think foundations are super transactional, actually, in the way they think about social change. So they're like, if the plot of the movie isn't about our goal right now, then we can't fund the thing. And I think it's hard for us to get our minds around that. And then I think the third is, to your point about financing, is it's asking us to structure the way that we invest capital resources differently. And my experience, whether it's rents, for-profit financing in any business or not-for-profit, is if the patterns never existed, everyone's like, that's impossible. And then one person does it, and it's like, let's get as much money as we can into that pattern. So I do think for people here, like you have to bring the new products to the people who are allocating the capital. But James, what about you? How do you feel? What are some of the trends that you're paying attention to?
I love what Amanda said. I think that's a lot of, that ecosystem is what I've been spending a lot of time over the last year thinking about. And I think particularly distribution. I mean, you think about, being at Sundance Film Festival and the prestige and the history here where, you had Tarantino, Ryan Coogler, these prominent filmmakers now break out and build their careers with studios. Sure, that still could happen, and that is happening, but I think the idea that there are distributors, legacy distributors that can pick up a movie that's either an international darling or just more of an independent film and do something meaningful with it that affects their bottom line and helps an artist out. I think there's a big disconnect there, and I think filmmakers need to know that it's part of their responsibility now to drive what building community and activating culture around a project looks like, and to find partners and other organizations to work with them on getting their film seen. And I think distribution in general should be rethought about, like, how does, in the same way that a musician is able to reach an audience with music through SoundCloud and Spotify and do live shows without needing a big record label. I think filmmakers and artists, we need to think about how does a film reach an audience in a different way. And so I think about again, Black news, right? Like if, Netflix doesn't want it tomorrow after the premiere, what do we do? And I was telling Khalil, I was like, we could do a city-to-city tour with that film and open up, a museum with other people and do installations, and maybe we charge people $60 to come in. Like all the economics of it, I think, need to change. So I've been thinking about a lot of that.
Can I add something there? I just, I am so glad that Black News is in your hands now. It's very exciting. And in some ways,
work on it together.
And in some ways,
Need a host for those screenings?
here we go, turning conversations into action. I would say that, like, in some ways, I don't feel sad that Participant closed. It was a company that was started 20 years ago, right? And the media landscape has changed enormously. The people that worked at Participant are still around. We're all still here, right? So, like, I think we learn from each other and we progress things, and it's a new world.
That point about there's the fragmentation of the audience challenges the economics, but it creates all these new go-to-market opportunities. I think is just so well. I mean, we're trying to think a lot about that as an investor in these, and Zeba's been incredible. It's like it's got whatever is the right thing for the audience is the thing we should be funding. But Kamal, what about you? What are the trends you're watching?
I mean, so I've talked about this a lot, and as we talked about this morning, I get most of my content through YouTube now. Like, I will turn on Netflix when somebody's like, you need to see that thing. Or if I'm like, I have a friend who has a comedy special, I will go see that. Michelle Buteau is the current one I've just watched. Roy Wood, too. But, like, there's so many people, and I think that we need to understand there are people who have no thoughts of how to get into mainstream show business who are in their kitchen or in their closet writing and talking about and editing video about things they care about. That is incredible, and they have a dedicated audience who finds it, and you will never hear about them unless you go find them out, or somebody like me, unless you meet a cool person like me to tell you about it. And the mainstream needs to go get those people, because those people don't need us. They are making a good living. They don't even think about they don't even think about Sundance because it doesn't sound like a thing that's for them. And they're not just young people. They're people who are like 40-year-olds who are like, I've always wanted to talk about knitting, and I'm just going to do it in my closet now after my kids go to sleep. And they have 500,000 people subscribed to that thing, and they are making a living doing that. And so I think for me, there's this idea that content, maybe if Netflix and all these people don't fund the content will be made, some of us will like go to YouTube and figure out, how do I do that thing that I want to do, but in this format, because there's an audience that you can go direct to. And a lot of those people don't meet you. There's a guy named H Bomber Guy who made a video about, who said, You're the first person who's ever said, So you're
Works at Doris Duke Foundation.
Yeah. I'm gonna look it up right now. So give me a second. H Bomber Guy made a video about a very plagiarism on YouTube. Doesn't sound like anything you'd care about. Plagiarism on YouTube. He has, let me see. There's like 20 million views. It is almost 4 hours long. So that person has found an audience to watch his thing. I've watched it. I'm probably good for about 1 million of those views because I've watched it several times. I'm weird.
You and Tessa.
Yeah. And it is incredible. It is one of the most incredible things I've ever seen. And I know you've heard me say that today, but I only have a short list, your thing and this. But and it's just, this dude is just doing it in his apartment, and it's shot well enough, but it is not shot well. It is not, you can hear the sound, you can hear the thing. And I'm like, that thing is happening over there, and he doesn't even need you, but we need him. That's how you change the media landscape. So that's follow me on my YouTube channel when I start it. So.
Yeah, if anyone wants to produce the fan cast of Kamau and Tessa for H-Bomb, I'm negotiating that after the
H-Bomber guy.
panel.
He lives in England. I'm a fan.
So I'm going to ask you all one more question, and then we'll throw it out to the audience. So be thinking about what questions you guys have. So to give another shout out, Diana Mogan, who runs Ride Back Rise here, is here with us and hosted an amazing dinner this summer on some of these topics. And there was a creator there who could be on this stage. I'm just not saying who because it was sort of private dinner. But one of the things they said was that they were frustrated by being in meetings about the kinds of projects we've discussed and hearing people say like, "Oh, this would have been great 5 years ago. We totally could have done this." And he said, like, we've got to disprove that. Like, that's not true. We can still do these things. So that's what disprove that. Disprove the pessimism that some of us are feeling because we're having those meetings and hearing those things. Explain why that's wrong when we hear that. And again, maybe we'll just go down the line. So James, over to you.
I would just say make it then, and find your audience will find you. If that conviction is real and you believe it, then make a proof of concept and find the H-bomber audience that's yours. Like, and then go back to and then the executive would be calling you. Because I fundamentally also do believe that great work rises, no matter how fragmented things are, no matter how, just make it. And because that is a real response, that executives are going to give you. And even when you've already made it, they're giving that to people. Even Issa Rae is being told what to do right now.
It's crazy. Sometimes I think we do need to just be medium, like move outside of the medium of just feature-length film or specifically, apportioned series. Part of me is like, this disruption is also going to come not only with change in how we platform things, but change in how we make things in terms of length and format and all of those pieces. So I'm excited about that because I think we're all consuming media in really different ways now. And there's a lot to be done there. And in some cases, it's going to be more affordable.
Yeah, I think that as a person who was born into being black, I come from a community where you always got to go. No, you're not gonna do this for me. The system, we'll be over here. Every black community used to have a thriving black newspaper because our stories were not covered in the traditional news. There used to be a thing that every black neighborhood had its own little downtown section where we could get the things we wanted, and it certainly happened in Arab neighborhoods and Muslim neighborhoods, and it still happens to some extent, where we could get the things we need because we can't get them. For example, I came to Sundance with an Afro pick because I knew I couldn't find one here, and I lost it in an Uber, and that's why my hair looks like this. So just knowing that, like, it's kind of always, instead of being like, man, it's always on us, it's like, yay, it's always on us, is the way I have to sort of flip it in my head.
All right, let's go to the audience. And maybe I think we're going to run a mic to you. And just if you could identify yourself too, that'd be great before you ask your question.
Salam, thank you. My name is Lina Al-Qaisi. I'm based in Los Angeles. I make Arabic resistance music, and I'm an entertainment attorney. My question is about...
Great combo.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, you got to do the work, all the work.
Kind of, and the question's related to that. So it's about interacting with the mainstream and like the man and the matrix while also making your art. I think all of us have different ways of doing that. And to your example about, the person who raises their kids and then just does knitting after work and has their own kind of like outsider audience. And then others of us who like make the art and then HBO might pick it up, versus still others of us who like have day jobs and then do what we use those day jobs to fund what we do without having to go to other people, but are, have 2 feet, 1 foot in 2 different worlds. I just wanted to ask a bit about either examples you've seen or mindsets around the fact that we're interacting with the state and like mainstream outlets while also doing what we do, because sometimes I find myself falling into like black and white thinking, like, oh, I just want to go to the maker spaces or just want to do the underground music for my friends, but then I have to go earn a living. Have you struggled with that dichotomy? Do you have any tips? I know it's kind of a broad question, but I hope you can answer in your own way.
I'm sorry, I just got excited. So right now there's a lot of talk about boycotts of social media platforms that are owned by jerks, I guess is the technical term. And there's also boycotts of like companies that have like canceled their DEI initiatives, boycotts of these major like big box shopping places. And a guy I know online, Black Food Fridays is his IG, Black Food Fridays, KJ Kearney, said if you boycott Target, and he has primarily a black audience, if you boycott Target, you have to understand that Target actually does a pretty good job of getting black products owned by black people on their shelves. So if you boycott Target, he's like, do your thing, but also understand that you're not necessarily, maybe not accomplishing the goal you want to accomplish. And some people are like, we all need to boycott these social media platforms, but there are people, and maybe you're one of the, who have built a career of work on these things, and that's how you let your audience know what you're doing next. And so I think we have to be really we just have to just know why you're doing what you're doing, so you can explain it to yourself. But I don't think it can't be black and white, because like otherwise I don't think we could all survive in this system of America if we made it black and white all the time.
You asked two good questions, and I'll answer maybe the other side of it. I love what Rick Rubin said, which was very simple and I think beautiful. He said, if you consider your art and your work an offering, and do that enough, eventually your people will come to you too. And you do it consistently enough, eventually it'll help pay for your livelihood, and maybe you can leave your job. But I think, we sometimes over or underestimate how much people that we look up to also have to do that, and also have to contend with, the financial side and the artistic side. So the mindset thing is cheesy to some degree, but being patient and continuing to like channel and create from that really personal and special place, and not leaving the job too soon to have that hurt that work, which I think some people also. My brother's a writer, and he's in New York, and New York's expensive, and he was waiting tables and had another day job and was writing his novel, and was really, really struggling. But I remember he told me, he's like, I'm not going to leave my job because I don't want to struggle. I don't want my time, my 2 hours a day that I have writing, I don't want to be thinking about my rent, And he's a Polish author now, so it worked out.
Yeah, I think there's no shame in a day job. I think a lot of times the idea of art not artist necessarily, but the idea of being an artist, you feel like I'm not really an artist until I give up my day job. And I think that's just not true, and also not realistic in this country to do that. So, I was a stand-up comic for many years and also worked at a video store, and in many ways I considered CNN to be my day job while I did stand-up comedy and did other things. So I think that there's no shame in a day job.
And I mean, Amanda, how did you? I assume this tension must come up all the time, where there's you need to finance the thing, but people that are financing it or distributing it don't always share the same goals. They have a different idea of the goals. How did you counsel, directors and teams to think about navigating those dynamics?
Sometimes it's about language, which we talked about, but it's also about timing. So, I'm like, should I name names? Yeah.
Are you going to criticize Seinfeld again on this panel? I mean,
some of the big distributors are really hard to work with, right? Because they have really strict rules about what you can do with their content and what you can say alongside the content. They don't want to politicize anything. And now what we're finding is foundations are kind of in the same boat, and they're scared. They're scared of the ramifications of some of the grants that they're making too. So it is a thing. You can be a little subversive about it, I think, and that's kind of how we would get around it oftentimes, which is, the work that we do on the policy front is always advocacy work, but it's reframed in a way. And we create some kind of a distance away from that advocacy work that typically helps. And so that I've seen work. The other thing is, oftentimes they want you to stay away from their content for a long time, especially in the beginning. They're like, don't get near this. We need it to be just like cinema. It needs to come out to the world as art, and like people need to receive it as that, nothing else. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh shit, we need an Oscar campaign. Can you let's press the important button, come in, help us immediately, So that ends up working out, because what we do is we secretly in the background we build all the things, and then we come in with it when they're ready for it. So that's part of it.
Great. Right here? Oh, it's Mike's. Oh, sorry, you're managing the queue? Okay, sorry. We're going to go there first. Okay. We got you, though. You're in the queue.
I appreciate it. Hey, everyone. My name's Khaled Ghunim, and I'm a filmmaker working on a documentary right now about my parents' migrations from Mexico and Palestine. And something that I am deeply pondering is also this thing of feeling like there's been an awakening that has happened in our country and world, and realizing that these systems are very much not created for any of our stories. And how are we going to be able to change a table that is not even meant for us in the first place. And so really grappling with this idea of, are we even trying to get a seat at a table versus making our own tables? And it's like, do we even try to go to the mainstream anymore? Or do we just let that go and like go to YouTube, go to TikTok, go to Snapchat, and just like make our movies for our people that are on there? I don't know. It's a good question.
Fantastic.
I definitely see and hear and agree with the sentiment and feel like making your work for the people in the audience that it's meant for and intended for, and not waiting for. I agree. I don't know what mainstream is anymore. You know, I think that's was Saint Laurent a mainstream artist last year? I don't know. Does anybody know who Saint Laurent is? Yeah. I'm at the Muslim house, obviously. But no, actually, that's a really good example. If we went to even Macro and asked those, you know, who are our brothers and sisters at Macro, who's Saint Laurent? Wait, do you know who Saint Laurent is?
No.
Exactly.
I'm also a
Is
dad.
Saint Laurent a
and I got
mainstream
lot
artist, right? I think that's the best example. Is Saint Laurent a mainstream artist? And for our brother come out to say, no, I think that is, we need to change that, right? He's a very successful and a very beautiful on the cover of magazines artist, but I think that is like a really interesting thing to think about, because what is a mainstream filmmaker? What is a mainstream writer? Like, you define it. And I think we compare a lot, and we look at, you know, traditional mediums, and we should just make the thing.
So first of all, that's a demonstration of my greatest gift. Don't be afraid to look ignorant. So that's one of my greatest gifts I feel like I have. Two, I would say to you is that we are in the position, like I had a show that was on CNN, and I had to grapple with, what are my friends going to think? You know what I mean? Like this idea. And you have to, at the end of the day, you have to be like, am I going to, I think it is, right now I'm working on a project with Razi Joffrey. Is Razi still here somewhere? He should be around. All my people, where are they?
He's here.
Okay, he left. Anyway, about the uncommitted movement, and I'm going to be I'm an EP on it, and that means we can get a meeting at CNN, and we took a meeting at CNN, and if CNN wants to show it, that is an incredible audience to have to see that thing. But if not, we will go through all the things, but it will get out somewhere. But it doesn't mean you don't take those meetings. It doesn't mean you don't get in front of those people. And also the thing you have to understand is the people you're talking to are going to be fired someday, and they're going to work somewhere else, and that place may be cooler. You know what I mean? So like, it's also just pursuing those mainstream avenues and channels is just a way to meet the people who are in control of this business, or the assistant of the person who wouldn't give you the thing is then going to be the head of the studio one day and be like, I wanted you to. So it's also just be out there as much as you can in ways as you can, because it all, you know, I know I look young, but I'm 52 years old. And like the connections I made in my 30s are now coming to bloom today, because they're like, yeah, I've known you for, you know what I mean? So be out there as much as you can, because we don't have a choice, those of us who have these intersecting identities. And we can't hope somebody, as I say in my stand-up act, likes the cut of our jib the way that white people get jobs all the time. So we have to be out there doing the thing. So I would encourage you, you have to try to get a seat at the table, and then after you leave that, you got to go home and keep working on building the table.
I think too, like you all mentioned this, is where, I mean, the fragmentation of the audience, and therefore the fragmentation of distribution, places pressure on the economics, but it opens up, it's the opportunity of the black newspaper, right? Like, as David Lynch just passed away, you know, for Twin Peaks to be made, Bob Iger had to convince executives that like 30 million people would watch. Like, that was the bar. You don't have to cross that bar anymore to be able to make something. All right, who's next in the? Yeah, the person in the front was. Yeah, okay, let's go here. I think we can take like one or two more.
Hi, my name is Akash. I'm a filmmaker and writer. I have a documentary in early pre-production, juxtaposing the experiences of long-term HIV survivors and those folks who are being newly diagnosed. Because I have friends who were diagnosed 40 years ago, told they were not going to make it to 30, are still around. I have friends who were diagnosed last year. And so we're looking at the political landscape of, as a filmmaker, how do you approach conversations with networks or platforms or studios that can help give your stories, I guess, a proper platform, when the concept of like DEI and woke and all of that, like there's such a intense political backlash at this moment. So when your identity is so crucial to the work that you're doing, how do you navigate a political space in which conversations about that identity are being actively erased?
Amanda, do you maybe want to start? Because I think this goes to the multilingualism point that you...
It is so hard. I feel like all of us have just been avoiding the elephant in the room, which is what this administration is going to do next, and, you know, just how much harder it makes living our lives and doing our work. And it was already hard to present this kind of content. Now it's going to be even harder. And to see the private sector join forces with the government is scary too. But that doesn't mean there aren't some amazing independent players out there, both of those who have resources and those that have connections and energy and networks, right? So I think that's where you go, but I guess I can't say that it's not hard. I think it's a really, really hard time.
Yeah, I wanted to add to that, and to Amanda's point about the multilinguistic kind of approach. I think thinking about, you know, why and what you're expressing in a multi-dimensional way, in that maybe it isn't just a film now that you're waiting for a network to kind of give you a platform for. Maybe you can think about, you know, a community-oriented activation that has, you know, bringing people together around food that's tied to your culture, and, you know, I think thinking about it in a multi-dimensional way that allows you to say what you need to say, and to put building blocks together that way is a way to do it as well.
Yeah, I think we all, those of us who are in this type of content or media or art, whatever the word is of choice, we have to think of it like a punk rock band. It's not like I think we want to think of ourselves as like the mainstream pop star, but I think on some level, like you were saying with Black News, you may have to sort of take that from like place to place and show it to small groups of people, but create a business model that supports everybody, and sort of go that like, and if you do that, you may get those mainstream outlets to come to you, but also the other thing I would say on top of that is like, make sure you are your own harshest critic of your work, not meanest critic, but make sure that when you get that meeting with the person who is in the place, that you actually have something that is not just doesn't sound good or sound. I haven't seen it. I'm not saying, but also is like can stand the test of somebody being like, I didn't want to buy this, but it is really good, you know, or I didn't want to really like. I'm like, so I think that's the other thing too. You have to sort of understand that like you are a punk rock band, but like just like the legendary punk rock bands like Black Flag rehearsed a lot. You know what I mean? So yeah, make it good.
So I think we're running out of time. So just last question. I think, in thinking about, you know, Amanda, what you really eloquently reminded us of, you know, this is a really hard time for these ideas. It's a draining time for these ideas. And I feel like it's a privilege to be here today with the people that we're counting on, actually in this hard time, to create new space, new stories, new ideas. So, like, I'd love for you each to give this group, like, a gift of, like, a memory or a piece of advice or a thought that has kept you going. But like, what's one thing that you can give this group so that they stay in the fight?
I'll share what I remember I picked up here, I think in 2019, I think it was 2019, but Barry Jenkins did one of the Junket interviews, and they asked Barry, what's the worst piece of advice you've been given? And I loved his response. He said, people told me that I should network. And he's like, don't do that. Look to your left and your right, and look at who comes to you, who gravitates towards you, and build with those people. And I think a place like this is such a perfect example. Someone like a Sue who has helped with the help of a Doris Duke Foundation, like build a Muslim house. I didn't think that there would be a Muslim house here 4 or 5 years ago. Like to walk through these doors and to look at people that are from parts of the world with the values and ideals that I have, I think this is where the magic can start. The Apprentice started at a festival with Ali and a writer that, he decided to take a bet on. So yeah, I would say don't worry about the networking and look to your left and right.
I have been so moved by the way that, again, like stories connect with movements. And I think that figuring out how to identify the people who have been working on this kind of the issues that may be hinted at in your content in some way, or the themes that get connected to themes in your content, finding those people is just so important, because, you know, I think we say this a lot, but like we're visitors in the space when we make a piece of content and we're suddenly like, oh, this is a piece of content about immigration or whatever it is, right? We may move on to another subject matter, but there are some amazing people working in that space. So whatever we can do to connect content into the movement and make sure it's not only accelerating their work, but it's leaving them in a better place than when we started. That's really critical, and that's about building capacity. It's about making the right connections, I've seen a lot of beautiful things develop out of that kind of relationship.
Yeah, I would say that when people ask me, like, what's the advice you would give your younger self, I always like, start sooner. So the sooner you start, the sooner you'll get the bad stuff out of the way, and you'll get to the good stuff, and you'll get to the great stuff. And stop waiting for somebody to give you permission to do this, and give yourself permission to do it. Because that's when my whole career changed. Is when I was like, I'm gonna the prompt I gave myself is, well, Kamau, you're going to comedy clubs and not doing that great, and you've been doing this for 10 years. What would you do if you were famous? And I was like, I would, and the thing I came up with was the thing, I was like, well, you can't do that, but you can do a show based on that in a tiny theater in San Francisco. And that tiny show in a tiny theater in San Francisco ended up getting in front of Chris Rock, who basically said, here's your whole career. So for me, it's like, start sooner, because I could have done that. I could have just given myself permission to do that earlier, so start sooner. And then my last thing I would say is, because I just can't go without giving out homework, philanthropy, venture capital, rich people, you have to take on a Renaissance model of funding. The people who funded the Sistine Chapel weren't thinking about flipping it, okay? You have to want to fund things so that art is in the world, because otherwise that art will not be in the world, because that's where we're at in the society, to talk about the elephant in the room. So that's the last thing.
Please join me in thanking this incredible panel. Thank you all so much.